All right. So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining today's weekly WAVE call. We do have a couple updates from last week. Some of the questions that were thrown around, we've got more solid answers to give you. So with that, I'll get started by talking about our COVID-19 guidance. So we did send out a GovDelivery email this morning, and it detailed information pertaining to calendars and absences, but I also wanted to talk about enrollments. So I've been seeing some questions about that in the last couple of days. So there is a link to that guidance about calendars and absences. For those of you who might not have gotten that information, I can go over that a little later. Just speak up in the chat because I do have all of you muted for the time being. So for enrollments in relation to COVID-19, you can still enroll your students in your school districts. We are absolutely not telling you all that you can't enroll any students or conduct any transfers going forward. If you do have some students that specifically told you or your enrollment office that they were going to be disenrolling and you now have an ownership conflict with another district, you would still treat this as normal. Whichever district was instructing that student the earliest would keep that student on roll. Now, if you are enrolling students past March 12th, when we cut off the ADA and ADM calculations for state aid, and those students who enrolled on March 13th on onward would not be visible on that report. We would still get that information perfectly fine. We will just not use that for state or federal reporting in most cases. So there's a comment in the chat asking me to go over the calendar and absences. So I'll kind of go over that kind of briefly here. For absences, you'll want to, if you have a student that was absent related to COVID-19, we included some attendance codes and our expectations of how we are supposed to be getting this information up from your student information system. There's a specific COVID-19 absence code that we are suggesting that you all use for this type of situation. But if you are having students that were really during this period of time, you're going to treat the absences just like you would normally do. But for calendars, it gets a little bit more specific. So I'll go a little slower for that. For calendars, if you have changes that you need to make on or before March 12th, then you'll follow and make those changes just as you would normally if this pandemic wasn't going on. For the week of March 12th during spring break, if you were on spring break, then you would still code those calendars as a holiday. For those of you who were not on spring break during the week of March 16th, then you would use the emergency day calendar code of 0849 for those of you who might happen to be using the zip code. But for your individual student information system, there should be a calendar type code of emergency. You'll use that during the week of March 16th if you were not on spring break. If you were on spring break, you would still code those calendar days just as you would have normally. For the period of time after spring break, so the week of the 23rd through April 3rd, you'll want to make sure that you are coding your calendars as emergency days. This is because the school board made that a mandatory secession period for all school districts. For the period of time after April 8th, if you are doing distance learning, then you'll want to code those days as instructional. If you're not doing distance learning and you're not providing any instruction to your students, then you'll want to code those days as you would if this pandemic, again, was not happening. We're not going to tell you that you need to code those as emergency days. That would not be appropriate. I did say March 6th. I meant April 6th for the period of time for April 6th. If you are doing distance learning, please code those days as instructional. If you are not doing distance learning, then you would code those days as you would have if this pandemic was not happening and your school happened to need to close or was scheduled to be closed anyway. This also answers the question for parent-teacher conference days. If you would still leave those days on there just as normal. If you happen to have a parent-teacher conference day, say on March 13th, that was still a parent-teacher conference day, and we would not expect you to have to update that. For reporting purposes, again, just like absences, we will not be using any information past March 12th, 2020. Okay, so that is that for the COVID-19 guidance. Eric did put that link in the chat for those of you who have not gotten that email that was sent out this morning. Also sent out this morning, we have a link to the waive requirements. Before I get into that, I'm just going to say, for those of you who are putting questions in the chat, I'll unmute you and we can tackle all of those then. I want to get through these updates right now. So we do have a link to our waive requirements document or website for those of you who have been around for a couple of years and are familiar with our waive requirements. We have moved from a PDF format to a digital format, hoping that we can provide you all with more information. One really cool thing about this new and improved waive requirements is that we have made public our request schedule for all the data that you all are sending up to us. So if you were ever curious why, if you need a change in your student information system, why the waive didn't also update, you can look at that request schedule and see that is that a day that the state was requesting the data or if it was not. There's also a section there that will be updating throughout the year that will have all of the report guidance, as well as letting you all know which pieces of information are being used by that report. Hopefully later on down the road or even right now, as we build up this waive requirements website, that it'll be a kind of one-stop shop for any data related questions that you have going forward. We want this to be open to not just the student information system vendors, but to everyone with any sort of stake in education data. So if you do have questions with that, you can email us and we will be happy to answer your question. So one other thing that was included in Gov Delivery sent out this morning was feedback on the waive. We are polling right now to see whether or not Thursdays at 10 o'clock works for everyone, since we've kind of got a little bit of fluidness in our days right now. If this time does not work for you, we can provide the form link that was sent in the email that just said yes or no, whether or not this time worked for you, or if you wanted to suggest a different time, you could also do that. I will post that in the chat in just a second. But aside from that, let me go forward just one more bit here. I did want to talk briefly about reports. For your expectations going forward, there have been a few of you who've emailed us directly asking whether or not a report was expected to be completed now that everything is kind of shut down and we're not doing assessments and we do not have a report card. So in regards to that, we kind of made some updates in the state reporting certification section of the waive. You might have noticed that the demographic overlay closed. kind of overnight. That report, obviously, since it's not open, we're not expecting for you all to do that report, mainly because there are no assessments for this particular school year. We should be coming out here soon. I can't give you all a specific date just yet, whether or not we are going to post that comprehensive list of all of the reports that OSDE is still expecting or needing to have completed for this school year. Right now, we're looking at, this is a number outside of WAVE collections, but some of you may be involved in this. Right now, we're looking at about 45 different reports across our entire building that we may need to have you all still do. Now, for the WAVE specifically, that number is significantly lower. The only reports that will be opening going forward for accountability purposes specifically is just for a, it's just going to be for your knowledge. Mainly, we're not expecting you all to have this data certified. It can just be something that you all look at, give your blessing if you want to, and certify that data, but we are by no means expecting you all to certify reports that pertain to assessment and accountability going forward. But again, we should be releasing that comprehensive list at some point this month.
I'm going to jump in here, Lakeisha.
Go ahead, Eric.
So we have listed, I did create a list of the 55 different reports that were due between March 31st and the end of July that are in our reporting requirements for the entire agency. It includes things from, finance to state aid to counseling, child nutrition, teacher cert, accreditation, curriculum and instruction, Indian Ed, teacher and leader effectiveness, all these things. And I've been communicating with all the executive directors across the building to determine which ones of these are still going to be required versus which ones will not. That list is now in the hands of the legal department to determine federal and state reporting requirements based on statute. There's a lot of conversation at the federal level on reporting requirements next year. Nothing obviously has been decided yet because some of these that are right now looks like we are required to do it regardless because of the reporting requirements federally. They may go away when if USAID decides to not require reporting next year on this data. But like Lakeisha had stated, of the 55 across the spectrum, it looks like 45 of them right now are still going to be due, but with a lot of flexibility in due dates and also with a lot of flexibility or low to no pressure on some of those reports because they're not going to be used in the same way. We would only be collecting them for longitudinal data purposes. So there's just a lot of things going on right now. Obviously, everything's changing. So I ask that you guys be patient with us while we try to determine what we can allow you guys to just ignore versus what needs to be actually completed. A lot of these reports don't actually start hitting until, the greatest majority of them don't start hitting due until June. So just bear with us while we try to work through this and do the best you guys can from afar, and we will do the best we can, and we'll work together. Go ahead, Lakeisha. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Thank you, Eric. So that sums it up for reports. So one thing that we did kind of want to ask, Eric had this wonderful idea about using Microsoft Teams for collaboration purposes with you all. We just kind of wanted to pull you. Feel free to unmute yourself. This is the last slide I have for you all. So you can unmute yourself if you want, or just shout out in the chat to let us know whether or not you think it's a good idea. Microsoft Teams has allowed for us, or really not just us, but everyone, to collaborate with not only your internal organization, but with outside folks as well. So we could, in theory, create a Microsoft Team channel with your consent and include you in on things that we might see that isn't necessarily GovDelivery email worthy. If we have a hiccup in the wave, we can just type out in the chat and send a message to you all saying, hey, the wave is down for a couple of hours. Just heads up. And you can get the, as soon as it's up, email message as well, or just IM is really how this works. If we have messages that we're posting on the Wave homepage, we can also post that there. So you're not always having to check back and see, is the state done with this issue every single day? You can just wait for a IM from any of our team that says, we're done with this, we're done with that. If we're seeing widespread issues with validations, we can write out tips and tricks on how you can communicate with your student information system vendor to get that fixed. Really, what we can do with this is pretty endless. So we just kind of wanted to see whether or not that works for you. And it looks like a lot of you are already saying yes. Some might just need some guidance. So that's great. Okay.
It also allows you guys to work with each other in a virtual environment, and you don't have to. I mean, you could use our infrastructure with Teams to communicate together without even us in the conversation necessarily. So it's just an idea. Sounds like I'm gonna go ahead and add. I've already created a team. Mila, you're already part of it. I wanted to get everybody else's yes, no. But it's fairly simple. It's if you can use Zoom, you can pretty much use Teams. It's actually really easy. So we can post files together, tips, tricks, all that stuff in there. You can message your questions instead of necessarily emailing. You may get a quicker response that way, and others could see the same response. We could create channels for specific issues going on. So just something that we've been considering now that OMES has opened that up to outsiders.
Mm-hmm. So I did just post another form. I'm all about forms this week. For those of you who we don't have your email address or we haven't communicated before, I just want to make sure that we are adding the right one. So if you guys wouldn't mind filling that out, Eric, I'll share that spreadsheet with you too, and Aaron, so we can add as we see them pop in. We're just going to ask you for your name, the email address that you want us to use, and what school district you're from. So, okay, sweet on that. So again, just like normal, if you do have questions, comments, concerns, anything under the sun, feel free to email us. Our email address is pretty much everywhere at this point. So I'll go ahead and actually open it up for you guys to ask questions. I'll go ahead and stop the recording for now. And if there is a question that is posed that we need to specifically address in any of our FAQs, we will definitely do that. We can update them pretty much all the time. And yeah, so stopping recording now.